Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather forecast brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We look back over the last couple of months here, we can see how dry things have been. This graphic shows you the October 1st through November 28th total precipitation ranks by climate district, and much of North and South Carolina and pockets in Virginia have been in a top 10 to top 15 driest such time period. And if we just zoom in on the month of November, seeing that we're about to finish it, now you can see the extent of that dryness across not just this region, but much of the lower 48. And what's going on here is as we've been talking about, there's been a real lack of a strong subtropical component of the jet stream. So instead of having the flow coming across the United States like you see in these four arrows, we've had it more coming out of this direction. And that's not the way to return moisture to any part of the United States. And what it does instead is produces a lot of these little clipper systems that run across the northern tier of the United States after the strongest onshore flow comes into the Pacific Northwest and also into British Columbia. As a result of that, our latest drought monitor update looks something like this. And so this was released here just the day before Thanksgiving. If you look here, we do have several locations across parts of North Carolina that are showing up in the first two stages of drought. Now that letter S, if you just kind of scroll down to the bottom of the drought monitor website, talks about what those letters mean. That just means short-term impact, typically less than 6 months, but it does have an impact on agriculture. And what I want to show you really quickly, if we come up here to maps and click on change maps, what you end up getting is the ability to look back at how much the drought monitor has changed over a certain time period. So I'll look over the last 4 weeks. We do see up to a 2-class degradation in places across North Carolina. There's also been parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley and the high plains from Texas to Colorado that have shown drought increasing during that time. Now I want to point out again why. Okay, so we're going to look at the jet stream flow here in terms of troughs and ridges for the month so far of November. And what I want you to see is we've had a big block in the North Atlantic. All right, we've had a ridge at times that's been forming here over the desert Southwest, and deep troughs coming into the Gulf of Alaska. So the net effect is to take the flow of the jet stream and do this. Now, whenever the jet stream during the cold seasons coming out of the northwest, we get a lot of upper level convergence. This is the wrong direction to have lots of low pressure systems developing that can kind of ride up out of the south or come up along the east coast. It's not the right setup. If you were to move this trough you see over the Great Lakes, which has been why we've seen the colder weather, if you move it back, just move it back to the west, okay, then the flow switches direction and we tend to get a lot more of an active pattern and more precipitation, but we just don't get it out of this particular setup. We call this particular setup really influenced here by the ridge that's downstream. We call this the negative phase of the North Atlantic Oscillation, but there's a bit of a shift in the Pacific that we have to pay attention to as well, and that's associated with something called the East Pacific Oscillations. We just watch this trough ridge pattern constantly to see if it gets stuck. Now, the fact that we've seen more ridging here and northwest flow has given us a cold month in November. And we can see here the ranks across North Carolina. It's been much below average in terms of temperatures. Now, we've got some good news in the near term if you want the warmer weather to come back. I've got a mild forecast coming here, but we need to talk about where this is going in the long range first. So I'd like to dig into the long range forecast before we get into the near term stuff. Okay, MJO, the MJO. Now, what is it? It's where we watch for big thunderstorms in the tropics from Eastern Africa, all right, all the way over to the Central Pacific. Now, when it sits north of Australia, all right, that's phases 4, 5, and 6, right in through here. And whenever there's a strong La Nina, like we have now, the MJO likes to favor phase 4, 5, and 6. And it's there now. What I'm going to be watching for is to see if the MJO can come out of phase 5 and 6 and maybe break over into phase 7. Now, when I say all that, what does all that mean? Because I know I talk about it all the time, but let's actually put some, real, simple kind of science down here so we can understand this together. Okay, first of all, if the MJO is over here, where I said it likes to be phase 5, it just tends to give us this pattern, right? If there's a La Nina and we're phase 5, and I've showed you this quite a bit, we get weak ridging here and troughs there and a big block over the North Atlantic. So see that? That's exactly where we have been throughout much of November because the MJO has been here for so long in phases 4 and 5. Now, if that MJO pattern breaks out of this, all right, it's going to start to shift this ridge and let it expand to the east. And that would happen if we can get the MJO through phase 6 over into phase 7. Now, the only way that that happens is if these sea surface temperatures, which you're watching in animation through September into October and November, watch. See how the cold water is emerging here with this La Nina? That's only occurring because of strong trade winds here. When we start to see these sea surface temperatures maybe bottoming out, that will indicate a weakening of those trade winds. And we're noticing that. Nina region 3.4, where is that? That's right smack dab in there, inside that box. We see that the temperatures bottomed out, warmed up a little bit in November, and they've been relatively steady, if not cooling a little bit. They're right now about minus 0.75 degrees Celsius. Now, this tells me that in the middle of the Pacific at this point, we're no longer seeing a rapidly strengthening La Nina. And then as you get over here closer toward, this is Nina region 1+2, that's right over in this area, okay, next to South America. We saw the temperatures really drop in mid-November, but they've kind of stabilized in this area for a while. So my point here is to tell you that in the near term, I'm not seeing this La Nina continuing to get stronger and stronger, and it's probably going to approach its peak in the next 30 days or so. Now what we're talking about here are these winds. So this is along the equator, here in the Pacific, and these are the trade winds we're watching very carefully. And those trade winds are pushing pretty strong into this direction right now. Now this is what I want you to get out of all of this. I'm going to show you a graphic here that goes from today, right here, all the way through the next 15 days. And again, where you see the reds, that's where the winds are coming a little bit out of the west over the tropics, and the blues and greens are when it's coming out of the east. Now we always try to find right where it meets, somewhere in that vicinity. And you go straight down to the graphic that's on the bottom. You can see that this is sitting over phases 5, 6, and 7, mostly over phase 6. Now if these trade winds weaken, this boundary moves this direction. And there's some indications that it might do that and push the MJO over toward phase 7. There's a possibility that that could occur. And if that occurs, it affects a couple of things. This ridge opens east. We get rid of the cold bias here, and we're going to start to see that this week. Secondly, if we just think about what this is going to do to the jet stream, okay, this is the low-level winds. Watch this. Let's take it up to jet stream level. It could affect this. That's the main branch of the jet stream. It's targeting British Columbia all week long. But if we start to shift this around, it will affect, global precipitation patterns, not just what we're seeing across the United States and here across North Carolina. But I want to point out one thing. We only see a polar branch of the jet stream. Notice there's nothing coming like from Hawaii straight across to Mexico and California and across the United States. This is the missing component from this year. Okay, with all of that kind of tucked away in the back of your mind, let me show you what we're watching here. You see, throughout the next several days, I'm just kind of rocking through the jet stream pattern. We have deeper troughs that are kind of anchored right in through here, right? And if you just follow the iso heights, or isobars if you want to think of them that way, the flow's doing this. That's that same northwest flow. But what we get here is as we play forward, there might possibly be a bit of a shift second week of the month. We're going to have to watch carefully. But you just kind of see it opening up a bit more like that. Now, the reason behind me sharing this with you is that if we end up letting that cold air out and it deepens troughs over the northwest, because there's some really cold air in California, or excuse me, in Alaska right now, this could shift our pattern around and give us better flow out of the west, maybe even some point out of the southwest. And the net effect of that is to go from a drier pattern over the next 7 days. I mean, look at this. Next 7 days, I'll tell you, the next chance of us getting precipitation is like 5 or 6 days away now. But as we play forward, now you watch this. You see going out there through week 2 or the second week in December, and we now all of a sudden start to see a return toward more normal precipitation. And if that is the case, and we're not just seeing the models wash this out, all right, it would signify a return toward better flow out of the west or southwest rather than the northwest. And I think we're going to have to watch that really carefully. Now, the longer range models, this is going from December 10th to January 10th, are expecting that to occur. They're going to get a brand new update late this afternoon, on Monday afternoon. It'll give us all new outlook here. But what you've got is look at how wet the west is going to be throughout December 10th to January 10th. That means the jet stream's got to come down here. And if it ejects and runs up through the Tennessee and Ohio Valley, this dry bias that you see here probably will not be as dry as indicated. I think we're going to have more quick-hitting fronts that come through, to deliver precipitation, which means we may not stay in this extremely dry pattern for too long. It would really help if the La Nina makes a peak soon and starts to fade. If it fades, we return back toward more normal precipitation pattern. If it fades, we could get more of those big East Coast cyclones showing up once we get into the middle of winter. All of that is what we're going to be watching here very carefully. And it's not just the European model that thinks, the second half of December, getting into the beginning of January is going to look like this. The model we run here in the United States called the CFSV2, while it's got you dry through the middle of the month, this whole region, okay, drier, right? We just saw that. Notice what it does by week 4. Pushes that farther to the south, kind of activates that more active storm track through here, and brings us back closer to average on our precipitation, through the second half of the month of December. So we're getting some, agreement in the longer range models about the potential of this pattern returning, better westerly flow rather than northwesterly flow. That's the main takeaway. So I'm going to have to watch all of that very carefully as we watch this pattern progress. So now that you know what I'm keeping an eye on, the bigger players that could affect our longer term weather, let's at least get a quick discussion in about the short term stuff. And to do that, we're going to turn to the European model. Now you're going to see in this 4 systems that just run like this. They're all going to come out of the Canadian prairie. There's a big ridge in place there. And so systems run the periphery of the ridge. That's what we get. We'll call them clipper systems because they move fast. Ready? So from Monday, there goes the first one right here through Michigan. Zips into the northeast. Tuesday into Wednesday. Second one goes right in through here, right over the Great Lakes. Nothing for us. Getting into Thursday and Friday. There goes the next one. And this one here showing up in Manitoba, cuts through on Saturday. We may not see a return of precipitation until one of these systems finally digs down deep enough and comes to the Great Lakes that we draw in some moisture from the Gulf. And here we are. I'm already gone a week in the forecast. We're all about to next Monday. Well, Monday morning. It could appear that on Monday, getting into Monday night, Tuesday, we could get some precip moving across North Carolina. But I'm 180 hours out in the forecast, and it's going to depend on this low forming and sitting over the Great Lakes to draw the front through to pull the moisture out ahead of it. Last week, this low was way down here. It disappeared over the weekend, then returned and showed back up, which means that the wave that's creating this is not well resolved in the model just yet. So while we see better chances of precipitation here, we don't yet know the exact timing. Could be next Monday morning that it sweeps through. That's what I'll have to be watching very carefully. But until then, watch this. I'm going to play through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I went real fast here. All the way through Thursday, getting out into Friday, Saturday. I'll just stop this. How about Sunday morning? No, Sunday evening, 6 p.m. The models are not putting down anything. We've got dry conditions until then. And the temperatures rebounding. When does it rain? Well, let's watch. There's Monday morning, afternoon, and evening. The possibility of getting a ½ inch of precip is in the models. That's all we're looking at, though. So we've seen week 2 showing better chances. That's when the pattern may start to shift and give us maybe a better look at some westerly flow. But overall, the next 10 plus days is drier compared to what it could be, especially the next 7 days. Let's talk temperatures now. Near-term temperatures. Whoops, here we go. Monday's highs, cold. We're still in that trough, but look at the warmth that's to the west. When does it get to us? Well, Tuesday we return toward normal. Look at this. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We go from cold start to the week to 50s, through the 50s, 60s, and maybe into the 70s by the time we get into the end of this week and weekend. When does it return toward normal? Maybe by next weekend, but I mean, look at this. Let's go back through it again. That's a big warm-up. Now, you probably are looking at how hot it's going to be in the plains compared to average. Just so you see here, these shades of color represent 25 to 35 degrees warmer than average. But that warmth spreads our way throughout the week. We're talking sunshine. We're talking warm conditions. I mean, this is going to be a beautiful end of this week. Friday, December the 3rd, 68 degrees in Raleigh. Now, how long does that last? Well, I told you that ridge opens up. So day 5 through 10, it's still there. We can still kind of see the effect of that, right? We may get a cooler shot into this weekend and early next week, but it's not as cold as it has been. And the models, again, until we get that full shift into phase 7, look at this. They're going to try to bring in some milder conditions there. That's what I'll be watching very carefully. So this gets us all the way out to about December the 13th. And so that's the flow pattern during that time period. Okay, let's look at some other places around the world and we'll wrap this up. Europe. Got some very cold air that's coming in and around the Scandinavian regions and through here, and cold air throughout much of Europe. We do see above average temperatures, though, from the Black Sea, which is here, into eastern Ukraine, and then a big section of the Russian wheat belt. The colder temperatures in through are going to continue to keep the heating demand high, and that's going to be critical for what we've been discussing for a while now about natural gas. I want to keep you aware of that. Next, let's go to South America, and I'm going to show you first for Brazil the latest, what we call Standard Precipitation Index, or SPI, looking at a drought map. And we see that much of Brazil's biggest growing area, Mato Grosso into Mato Grosso do Sul and Goiás, these areas here, we've had above normal precipitation. Our drier conditions have been south. This is Sao Paulo, this is Paraná, Santa Catarina, and down here is Rio Grande do Sul. That's been the region we've been on the lookout for drier conditions, that and parts of Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina. Now, just thinking about this, I'd like to show you the next 10 days. So the model's here looking at precipitation anomalies, and we see that this region, almost a big donut hole here of very dry conditions. That includes the Paraná River, which runs right in through here. That's a major river that we have to keep an eye on. And all of the surrounding land, very productive farmland in there, quite dry. We even notice into Mato Grosso do Sul and even southern Mato Grosso that we're going to see drying conditions as the wettest weather presses north and east. So this is going to be a region I'm going to watch very, very carefully because we grow a lot of corn and soybeans in this area, plus other crops. Because the longer range models from December 10 to January 10, while they attempt to return better moisture here, Rio Grande do Sul, where we've already got drought, into Argentina and Uruguay, which is right in through there, the models have continued to show drier conditions, and that's consistent with La Nina. That's consistent with the stronger winds we've seen in the jet stream level, but down in South America, or excuse me, in the southern hemisphere. And we need to be just, I think, watching this very carefully for some potential drought development. It could be an important market story as we go forward. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hope you all have a good rest of your week. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving weekend, and I will talk to you again next Monday. Thank you.